let's talk about the Blood Hunter. Available for free on D&D Beyond as a effectively homebrew by Matt Mercer. A very interesting class that I honestly don't see used all that often, and I think it deserves a little bit more attention and deserves to be really broken down. Now, at its core, this is effectively just a fighter with some perks. Now, I'm going to completely ignore the subclass features, and I'm going to completely ignore all the fighting aspects and just hone in on its flagship ability, the Blood Curses. That's its flagship feature, and that's going to be the crucial element that decides whether or not you're going to take a fighter or a Blood Hunter. Now, up until level 5, you only get one Blood Curse. So which Blood Curse you take is going to severely change your perception of this class and its utility. If you pick a bad Blood Curse, you're stuck with that until level 6, and you're going to be bored out of your mind if it sucks, and you're probably going to hate the class. Also, keep in mind that if you want to amplify any of these abilities, you have to take damage. 1d4 damage at levels 1 through 4 to actually take these oftentimes very weak bonuses and make them actually do something interesting. So the first Blood Curse on the list is Blood Curse of the Anxious, and all that does is give you advantage on intimidation rolls. Total garbage, not reading through it, skip it entirely. There are other ways to get advantage on intimidation, and if your Dungeon Master isn't going to give you advantage on intimidation because you did some excellent roleplay, they probably don't want you to intimidate the enemy at all, in which case, whether or not you had this feature is kind of irrelevant. There are way easier ways to get advantage on intimidation that don't involve taking an entire class. Next is Blood Curse of Binding, and oh my god, this is a tremendously powerful ability. As a bonus action, you can bind a large or smaller creature you can see within 30 feet and force it to make a strength saving throw. On a failure, the cursed creature's speed is reduced to 0 and it can't use reaction. So let me paint a picture for you, alright? You are level 1 and you come up against a boss monster. But this boss monster is melee only. Now, normally this would be a hard or deadly encounter, but as a Blood Hunter, you can just stand 30 feet away from this thing, instantly reduce its speed to 0, meaning it can't get closer to any of you, and then you and your friends can spend a round just throwing projectiles at it with zero fear of it coming and attacking you. And if you amplify it with 1d4 necrotic damage, this effect lasts for an entire minute. Imagine that. Imagine completely incapacitating a melee boss monster at level 1 for a full minute. That is absolutely insane. The next Blood Curse is, as a bonus action, you curse a creature that you can see within 30 feet, causing its body to swell until the end of your next turn. For the duration, the creature has disadvantage on strength checks and dexterity checks, and takes 1d8 necrotic damage if it makes more than one attack in its turn. Now, this I feel like doesn't work great on its own and doesn't work great at lower levels, because that 1d8 necrotic damage only affects it if it's taking more than one attack on its turn, which doesn't really happen until higher CRs that you're probably not going to encounter at lower levels. Plus, the fact that it gives disadvantage on strength saving throws makes it an excellent combo with the Blood Curse of Binding, which requires a strength saving throw. I don't think it makes sense to take this until level 6 and combo this with Blood Curse of Binding against a creature that has multi-attack. This doesn't really make sense at lower levels, but definitely a good secondary option. Next, we have the Blood Curse of Corrosion. As a bonus action, you cause a creature within 30 feet of you to become poisoned. Now, this isn't available until 15th level and requires you to take the specific subclass Order of the Mutant. And if you're already 15th level, this is the least efficient way to poison your enemies, and you don't even get it until level 15. Total waste. Absolute waste of your time. Now, granted, you can amplify it to do 4d6 necrotic damage, but if you're level 15, 4d6 necrotic damage is not that significant. There are better things that you could be doing at level 15 that do way more, that are way more effective than this. The next one is Blood Curse of the Exorcist. As a bonus action, you choose a creature you can see within 30 feet of you that is charmed or frightened which is under the possession effect, the creature is no longer charmed, frightened, or possessed. This is such a niche, specific thing, and it's also, again, restricted to level 15 and restricted to Order of the Ghost Slayer. I have no idea who would ever actually use this. This is such a niche ability that is level locked to such a high level of play, it is not worth taking unless you already know you're playing a ghost heavy campaign and you already know you're gonna get to level 15 and higher. Now let's look at Blood Curse of Exposure. When a creature you can see within 30 feet of you takes damage from an attack or spell, you can use your reaction to temporarily weaken its resilience. Until the end of the target's next turn, it loses resistance to all damage types dealt by triggering the attack spell. Now this is another one that really doesn't make sense until you get to those higher levels of play where monsters actually have resistances to damage. Aside from zombies, which are resistant to poison, which is not a very common damage type at all, it really doesn't make sense to take this ability. Save this feature for when you're going up against a demon that's resistant to fire damage and your wizard wants to use fireball so badly. This is a great second option for 6th level, but outside of that, I don't see it being particularly useful. Definitely don't take this as your first Blood Curse, because you're not going to use it. Next we have Blood Curse of the Eyeless. When a creature you can see within 30 feet of you makes an attack, you can use your reaction to roll 1 Hemocraft die, which at levels 1 through 5 is 1d4, and then you subtract that number from the creature's attack roll. You can choose this feature after the creature's roll, but before the DM determines whether the attack hits or misses. The creature is immune to this curse if it is immune to the blinded condition. Now, only being able to subtract a 1d4 when you're considering the fact that rolls are done with a 1d20, very rarely is this going to be the make it or break it, get hit or don't get hit ability. I would wait until at least level 5 where your Hemocraft die gets up to level 1d6, or even better, wait until level 11 when your Hemocraft die gets to 1d8. 8 points is a much more significant swath of potential hit or not get hit. It's going to have a much more dramatic effect. So I would take this feature as maybe your second Blood Curse, but I think it really shines if you take it as your third Blood Curse, because it's at those higher levels where you're going to see this actually make a difference. But at those lower levels, 1d4 subtracted from their attack roll, not going to be making the greatest of differences, and definitely not better than the Blood Curse of Binding. Next we have Blood Curse of the Fallen Puppet. When a creature you can see within 30 feet drops to 0 hit points, you can use your reaction to instill that creature with a final act of aggression. The creature immediately makes 1 weapon attack against a target of your choice within its range. Now this narratively, so much fun. I love this a lot. Plus, depending on how strong the enemy is, this could be insanely powerful. Keep in mind, this is any creature, not just allies, not just enemies, any creature. That's nuts. Imagine you're going up against multiple big bad enemies and you finally knock down one of them, and as a final act of aggression, it uses one of its abilities against its ally. Imagine you're fighting 2 young dragons, and after killing one of the young dragons, as a final act of aggression, one dragon turns to the other and uses its breath weapon. That would be epic. It would do devastating damage. This is the first curse that I feel like actually rivals the Curse of Binding in terms of utility. Your Dungeon Master is very likely to throw you up against enemies that do more damage than you do. So being able to use that damage against other monsters on the field, hugely useful. And it means that if one of your allies goes down and that was your heaviest hitter, like your paladin, having your paladin be able to make one final swing with this weapon, and as a DM, I would allow them to smite with this, because it's still 1 weapon attack, even if it uses their bonus action to add a smite. I would definitely allow a paladin to smite as their final act of aggression. Think of the narrative, right? Your paladin just got impaled in the heart. They are fucking dead. They are gonna start making death saves, but as a final act of aggression, they bust out a divine smite and obliterate one of the enemies. How cool is that? Not only is this mechanically useful, it is narratively way cooler than just reducing their speed to 0. Definitely a good choice at basically any level. And also, its Amplify feature is very powerful as well, allowing the cursed creature to move up to half its speed, and you grant a bonus to their attack roll equal to your Humancraft modifier, which is your intelligence or wisdom bonus depending on which one you selected, is gonna make that final attack so much juicier and give them the ability to actually reach an enemy if they happen to be at a little bit further range. Now, keep in mind, this is a weapon attack, so this works on your archer as well, allowing them to make one final arrow attack. This is such a good ability. You should absolutely take this as soon as you can. Next, we have Blood Curse of the Howl, which as an action, you unleash a blood-curdling howl, and every creature within 30 feet of you that can hear you must succeed a wisdom save or become frightened. Now, sure, it does have the ability to also stun if they fail by 5 or more, but there are easier ways to frighten and stun your enemies that don't require taking an entire class just to do that. And it's level locked to 18th level, and it's locked to Order of the Lycan. By level 18, you 100% already have spells that can frighten your enemies. This is going straight into the garbage. Don't even consider this. Waiting until level 18 to frighten somebody is crazy. What a worthless blood curse. Do not take this. Next, we have Blood Curse of the Marked. As a bonus action, you mark a creature that you can see within 30 feet of you until the end of its turn. Whenever you hit the cursed creature with a weapon for which you have an active Crimson Rite, which is the Blood Hunter ability to add a tiny amount of elemental damage to their attacks, you roll an additional Humancraft die when determining the extra damage from the rite. So this is a pretty, I would say, mid-tier ability. You're really just enhancing an ability that this class already gives you, going from slightly more damage to slightly more damage. It's definitely not a bad ability, it has its utility, but I think compared to the Blood Curse of Binding and the Blood Curse of the Fallen Puppet, it's just not quite as strong. I think this works if you're the type of person who just wants to deal maximum damage at all times. You're trying to min-max that damage output. Sure, go ahead and take the Blood Curse of the Marked, but aside from that, it's not really all that interesting or all that powerful. Next, we have Blood Curse of the Muddled Mind. As a bonus action, you curse a creature you can see within 30 feet of you that is concentrating on a spell or using a feature that requires concentration. That creature has disadvantage on the next con save it makes to maintain concentration. There are definitely enemies in this game that have spell casting, but that's a fraction of the total enemies. And the number of spells that require concentration, again, that's a fraction of a fraction. And all you're doing is imposing disadvantage. This is not worth it. There are much more powerful abilities. This is not worth your time. At the very least, it's not level locked and class locked, but even then, it's not worth it in my opinion. Spell concentration, in my experience, does not come up all that often. And lastly, we have the Blood Curse of the Soul Eater. When a creature that isn't a construct or undead is reduced to 0 hit points within 30 feet of you, you can use your reaction to offer their life energy to your patron in exchange for power. Until the end of your next turn, you make attacks with advantage and you have resistance to all damage. And if you amplify this ability, you regain an expended Warlock spell slot. Once you've amplified this Blood Curse, you must finish a long rest before you amplify it again. Now, this would actually be pretty decent. I mean, resistance to all damage is crazy. Forget advantage. There are other ways to get advantage. We don't care about that. Resistance to all damage is crazy. But the fact that it doesn't kick in until you've already released at least one creature to 0 HP, and the fact that it's level locked to 18th level, and the fact that it's subclass locked to Order of the Profane Soul means you're probably never going to get the chance to use this ability, even though it is genuinely useful. I put this at mid tier. When you get it, if you have the opportunity to use it, it's great. But an 18th level restriction and a subclass restriction and the restriction that someone has to drop to 0 hit points first, I really don't see anyone playing long enough and fitting this specific criteria often enough to really make this matter at all. I would personally homebrew this, and I think you should too. You should absolutely homebrew this feature if you're a dungeon master and you're watching this. I would completely get rid of the level and subclass restrictions for this blood curse and just weaken it to resistance to one specific damage type. I think gaining resistance to a single damage type after felling an enemy is a lot of fun, and I personally think you should lock that damage resistance to the primary damage type that enemy output. So if you go up against a enemy wizard that fireballed you and then you kill them, I think you should get resistance to fire damage, because it's like you conquered them, you ate their soul Kirby style, and you put on that little Kirby hat, and guess what? Now you've got their power up. I think that's a lot of fun. So that's my take on the Blood Hunter. I think it really comes down to which blood curse you take at the very beginning, and I think the Blood Curse of Binding and the Blood Curse of the Fallen Puppet are absolutely far and away your best options. I think if you take this class and you take one of those two as your first blood curse, you're gonna have a ton of fun, and you're gonna wanna play Blood Hunter way more often in the future, and everyone at your table is gonna wanna play Blood Hunter at least once. That's my take. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. Bye, guys.